like training, I think we've covered in other podcasts, but also what's it like currently working like in practice. So welcome, Abdi, to the show. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for giving your time and being with us here today. How are you?
Hello. Yeah, no, I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to be here, and to be part of kind of the podcast and things like that. Jolel, you and me go back a long time now, actually. A couple of years now, isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
it's been a couple of years since. To be fair, you were doing training, and then I think you were coming to the end of training when I was starting training. So I was kind of looking at your journey and kind of like, because I think it was on LinkedIn as well, and Instagram and things like that. Um, and then I remember looking at your journey and going, "Oh gosh, just get to your stage, just get to your stage, the final stages." And then yeah, now thankfully we're both kind of qualified, both doctors. We've come a long way.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. Thanks for reminding me. I do remember that. Like, of seeing another person studying health psychology, I was like, I wonder what brought him to the field. Like, it was good to see another person, another male, for example.
Yeah,
Forget someone from an ethnic minority, but definitely another man studying
you
psych.
you'd be surprised how like literally when I remember when I did my undergrad, I was like
Yeah.
one of like four or five. Imagine a whole room of like 300 people and being one of four kind of like men. And then I think another there was another guy that was from an ethnic minority background. So it was like there was two of us in terms of from kind of a BAME or whatever we want to call it background, um, and then two other guys, and then a sea of just kind of obviously being the only men within kind of a psychology section. It was like that probably from as soon as like the first day of my undergrad, right the way through graduation, right the way even into the field. Like I've been in buildings. I've said this before. I've been in buildings where the entire building, not just the psychology department, the entire building is like all female. I'm the only male. I always say it's great to have it's great to have your own bathroom because like you got the women's toilets and the men's toilets, and there was times when literally the men's toilet would just be my toilet. Like I'd leave things in there. I feel like I'd have different things in there. I'm like, yeah, sorted. This is my bathroom, because no one would ever go in there. So, well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a weird kind of space to be in, and especially going into health psychology because a lot of I don't know what your experience is like, but my experience has always been that a lot of especially blokes they'll go into like either neuro psychology in terms of kind of looking at kind of how the brain functions and different brain things, um, and they don't tend to go into the more obviously therapeutic side of things. They almost go into the hard fact, more medical side of psychology. Whereas I feel like by one going into the one going into obviously the more therapeutic side and kind of health psychology and kind of the clinical space as well. I feel like that kind of made it look weirder than kind of the normal, if that makes sense. Um, I don't know about you, but I've had people kind of think that I'm like a psychiatrist or like a medical doctor, and I'm like, no, I'm a psychologist, and they look at me and go, really? And I'm like, yes, I'm a health psychologist at that. And they're like, oh, and they look at me to go, this is the strangest thing ever. But I don't know what your experience is with that.
It's very similar, yeah, absolutely. And that was going to be my question though. So what is it like? Like, why is it like that in the first place? Why is it that we don't have um, people like us? Because I think social psychology about how people can relate to is very important. It's a big predictor in terms of our discipline. So we know it very well. Like we study it. We know the impact of social modeling. So why is it? Why do you think like there wasn't as much, or there isn't as much like people like myself and you in this space as a profession?
Well, I think that kind of gets split into two. So you almost
Mm.
kind of, if you're looking at it like, if you look at it in terms of like males within psychology, not even kind of taking away kind of the ethnic minority aspect of psychology, putting that to one side for the time being. just being kind of a male, it's always been, I think psychology has always been seen as like a female dominated kind of a female space. And especially, and going into kind of traditions of kind of how a few like people might have been previously kind of brought up in terms of, you know, men shouldn't cry, men shouldn't talk about their feelings, men shouldn't kind of be emotional in a sense. It almost makes you think, well, okay, if you've kind of grown up that way, why would you then go into a profession where you then have to dig up all these emotions and feelings and think about, this is going to sound strange, think about thinking or think about thoughts? Why would like majority of guys go into that space? It doesn't make sense. Whereas I feel like for me, I looked at it like, especially when I was in sixth form, I looked at it like, well, I can talk for England. Like everybody knows that I can talk to anyone, start a conversation, make a connection with anyone in a sense. And because of that, I think when I looked at psychology, I looked at like therapy, and I just saw therapy as just talking to someone. I don't know about yourself, but I used to talk to my friends, and people used to just gravitate towards me and kind of offload to me. So I used to see that as like, oh, okay, this is what psychologists do. Obviously, it's not just what psychologists do, but at the time, that's what I thought. So it was almost like, okay, I'll just pursue this, and then, oh, well, I can make a living out of just talking to people. Oh, okay. Oh, what? It's a really, because if you think about it, psychologist salaries are quite good in comparison to all the professions. I can make a decent living from this. Like, okay, this is what I want to do. Which again, I understood was against the norm in terms of, you know, they said that the men are supposed to be more interested in things rather than so it's. But I kind of went against that and was like, well, no, we need to be more interested, especially men. We need to be more interested in other people, because if you think about it, that's the essence of life in a sense. You can't, like, I can't imagine anything worse than kind of not having like my friends, my family, like people around me, people I care about around me. I can't think of anything worse than not having that. So when you realize that, it's like, and you realize that actually a lot of men are in that position where they don't have that kind of support network around them, quite lonely, quite isolated. They actually need to obviously access kind of mental health services. And one thing as well, I realized that going into why more men should kind of go into our profession, I've realized, especially now being fully qualified, that men are more likely to access the service if they know that there's another bloke there that kind of has some idea of kind of what they're going through. I've had it where, especially working in inpatient settings, where when I was training, I was working in inpatient settings, and it was a male ward, and they were just used to, when you see a psychologist, they're used to just seeing kind of a female psychologist. So a lot of the things they wouldn't really want to talk about. They'd say, no, I'm fine, things like that. But as soon as I kind of came in and kind of had a conversation, I wouldn't even start the conversation or start the sessions with anything psychology related. I would talk about things, just life, like talk about football, talk about sports, talk about just this video game, that video game. And because I was able to engage them in a more kind of human, kind of, not man to man, but almost like
non-clinical,
like, so tell me how you feel, how's this? I kind of stayed away from that for the first like 15, 20 minutes, because it's like, it's just starting a conversation with someone, it's building a therapeutic relationship with that person. Because I am a guy, and I know that, let's say I know that someone, one of my service users is a massive like Wolverhampton Wanderers fan, and I'm a massive Liverpool fan. That was the in that I always had. That I could always talk about football, I could always talk about sports, boxing, things like that. So it's getting them into the conversation. And what I think I've realized is I've managed to weave in a lot of the psychological conversations around those kind of broader interests. But I feel like that would never happen if they kind of went into a room and sat with, let's say, a female psychologist that might not have the same insight, that might not have the same kind of interests in the same topics as him. That conversation might have been, or that kind of start of that therapeutic relationship might have been slightly different. So I think it's difficult, because like I said, men always don't talk about your feelings, bury it, be a man up, things like that. So it's almost like by default, you're almost kind of told not to go down the psychology route or the psychological, especially seeing kind of an environment where it's just 90, I think it's like 90 or 95% female. you kind of get the, I'm just thinking as a 15, 16-year-old lad, it might be great in the short term, but then long term you might think, well, no, I want to go in somewhere that I can feel comfortable and things like that. So that's in terms of the just the men in psychology. Then you add the added kind of layer of being an ethnic minority man within kind of the psychology world. There was so many times that people would, like I said, people would either mistake me for, people would either, this is going to sound strange, people would either mistake me up or down, if that makes sense. Like, people would either think I'm the psychiatrist that's on the ward or in the service, or they would see me as, I've been confused for service users in the past. I've been confused for support workers. I've been confused for just for someone that, like, not cleaner, but just kind of the maintenance man. So it's like, and it's kind of awkward when you got to say, no, I'm the assistant psychologist, or I'm the trainee health psychologist, or I'm the health psychologist here. Hi, I'm Dr. Mohamed here. Hello. So it's, again, that's like an added layer of why would you bother, in a sense, if you know that it's already going to be difficult, then you stand out, then add on that you stand out even more. A lot of people, I'm just thinking, a lot of people that go into or thinking about going into psychology as ethnic minority people in general, you're going to have that thought in the back of your head of it's a very, to be honest, it's a very white middle class kind of profession. Am I going to fit in? And a lot of times, a lot of people say, well, no, I'm not going to fit in, so I'm not going to bother. So I think that's where the barriers come into. And I wish I had kind of a very simple response or very simple answer to fix all that, but unfortunately it's quite complex to, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think the 2 points, like, okay, with gender, absolutely. And then I had another question with that gender one around the men. Because I think you made such an important, not just one point, but several key points which a lot of people miss. So the question I had on that is, like, do you think that's the reason why we have a high rate of suicide, for example? Because if men don't access support because there's no one to go to, practically because there's no one they can relate to. So it's their responsibility or their ownership or actions, if you like, are diminished because there's no proper personal infrastructure in there.
Well, if you think about it, Jolel, like, there's, if let's say if I was going to therapy, if I would want to be able to speak to someone, this is for anyone actually, not just for myself, but you would want to speak to someone that that you would have that thought of they have some idea of what you're going through. So I think the worst session that I could picture in my head is if I've met a lot of psychologists like this, if I was to go into a room with someone that is quite upper class, doesn't have, let's say I'm trying to put myself into a position of, imagine I was a 42-year-old bloke that is really stressed out by I can't afford kind of my bills, and I'm gonna get evicted, and I'm gonna, I've got a family, that I've got kids that are depending on me. The worst person in the world, in my opinion, to speak to in that situation would be kind of a very kind of upper class, middle class kind of person who has never gone through or know anyone that's kind of gone through that, if that makes sense. Because how we're supposed to be, as clinicians, we're supposed to be empathetic, or at least try to be empathetic. In reality, and that it's not a hindrance on the clinician, but it is a hindrance of kind of understanding where they're coming from. You want to be able to say, you want to be able to kind of look at them and go, mate, I know, like I know, mate.
I'll be with you, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, please, like, tell me about what bills have you got to pay for? All right, what services can we access? I've actually had situations where, this is when I was training, that there was a clinician that it was me and this psychologist. She was great, but we went to visit this service user, and the service user was basically like really highly anxious, was having, literally while we were there, having a meltdown, and I remember we just kind of sat on a sofa and was like, okay, what's going on? And she wasn't really making sense in what she was saying. It was almost like a lot of rambles, and obviously you could tell that this person was like just really stressed, really kind of anxious. I remember the psychologist was like, "Well, okay, let's take a breather. Do you want a cup of tea? I know I'm in your house, but is that the kitchen over there? Do you want a cup of tea?" I just make a cup of tea. Spent the next 5 minutes just kind of having a cup of tea, just going, okay, let's sort this out. What is it? And actually, like, transpired that the service user, it wasn't to do with anything mental health related. It was situational in terms of, again, the situation I've just mentioned. Can't afford their bills. About to be evicted. Don't just receive this massive unexpected bill in the post, and because obviously everything was piling up and the anxiety levels were so high, that she wasn't able to kind of articulate that in kind of the best way. But this psychologist that I was with, she genuinely sat there, kind of was very empathetic, was like, "Oh God, that's a very high bill. Like, okay, what can we do?" And because she had not saying she had kind of loads of experience in it, but because she had some experience of understanding what people are going through, she was able to then say, again, nothing quote unquote psychological. She was able to then say, right, what services can you access right now to be able to support with that? Right, let's get Citizens Advice Bureau on the phone. Right, you've got a social worker. Let's call the social worker right now. So nothing that you would quote unquote see as psychological, but that was the most therapeutic by far. Actually, I'd say in like all my years, that was one of the most therapeutic kind of positive sessions that I've ever witnessed kind of throughout my whole career. And it was nothing, there was no psychological models, there was no this, there was no that. It was just a genuine human conversation, being very empathetic, of knowing, having some insight. Because when I was speaking to the psychologist after, she was like, "Well, yeah, I remember when I was in uni, I had, eating beans and not having a lot of money and things. I'd never had parents that was able to support me kind of in that time. So yeah, I know how you feel. That's how." And she was like, "That's how I knew straight away. Let's go to Citizens Advice Bureau. What benefits are you eligible for? What can you do? What avenues can you go down?" She was able to take some of her lived experiences, or kind of lived experiences that she knows have kind of happened to kind of people close to her, and then be able to apply that to the situation. So you now take that back to kind of men, kind of that wanna seek kind of support, seek advice. A lot of the difficulties, let's be honest, a lot of difficulties that a 45-year-old kind of bloke might feel. Let's say take into consideration all the the decades of being told, don't let your feelings out, don't be emotional, man up. Then having to then sit in front of a psychologist that might not know what he's going through, or have that experience of feeling kind of horrible, of feeling very emotional, but having to stiff up a lip in a sense to go, right, I just need to kind of get on with this because I can't show weakness or emotion or things like that. If someone hasn't experienced that, how are you then gonna empathize with that person? And then not only that, regardless of being able to empathize or anything like that, the service user, who's this 45-year-old bloke, might instantly look at a person and say, "No, there's no way that you're going to understand what I mean. So I'm just going to sit here because I've been told I need to sit here, and I'm just going to sit and say, everything's fine, everything's fine, everything's fine." And when in fact it's not. Again, when I worked in inpatient services, I had that. I had service users, quote unquote service users, that people would say, "Oh no, there's no point in seeing him. He's not going to talk to you." And I'm like, "Well, why?" Like, we've tried different types of psychologists, psychotherapists, things like that. Let me try. Let me just see. Go in there again. Massive Wolverhampton Wanderers fan. You mate. What do you think of What do you think of Wolves this year? What do you think about this? Oh, your player, like Traore. Oh my God, he's amazing. Start a conversation like that. Then weave into the conversation. Yeah, that's amazing. So why? What's going on then? So what? Why have they told me to come and speak to you? Why? And that kind of opens the door to go, well, because this happened and that happened. All right, tell me about it. What happened? And then just that little in of building that kind of common ground, which, again, it's not saying anything kind of female male kind of thing. It is more of just, well, what interests have I got? I've very rarely meet a psychologist within training, within kind of my undergrad, masters, even in kind of my professional job now, like my NHS job now. I've never really seen a lot of psychologists sit in a meeting and talk about football. That doesn't happen. But again, the demographic that we're talking about in terms of kind of blokes, to kind of have that engagement, they might need that. They might need just a conversation that they might have in the pub, or they might have kind of with their friends. They might need that kind of familiarity of that conversation, the start of a conversation, to then be able to get deeper in. But it also kind of flips back to, if I don't know, if I'm seeing, I don't know, if I'm doing an assessment on a teenage girl that talks about makeup, or talks about kind of, you know, this like this artist, that artist, I might not have a clue. So then in that case, I might need the, you know, another psychologist to go in to be able to kind of engage with them better, in a sense. But yeah, it's a tricky one. But, and again, like I said, I wish that there was a way that I could kind of have an instant answer or instant fix for this, but I don't, in a sense. I think that's another thing, actually. This sense of fixing. Because if you think about it, as men, whenever I know for myself, if I have a problem, I'm thinking, how do I fix this?
Yeah.
Like, and how do I fix this the quickest way possible?
Yes.
So, and just for transparency, I can't think of, and this is nothing against psychotherapists, but I can't think of anything worse than having to sit for a year or a year and a half deconstructing everything and kind of like breaking me down to then rebuild me and things like that. I can't think of anything worse. If I was the type of person that, let's say if I accessed kind of psychological mental health services, just the way that I think, I would want to know, okay, I have this issue, how do I fix it? You tell me. I'm here for you to tell me how to fix it. Whereas psychology, as we know, there's no fix. There's no like, right, we're not, you know, it's not the medical model where, here, take this pill, take this, take that. We're very different to that. But at the same time, that's what I can imagine a lot of men, myself included, would expect. I think that's why I'm very big on something called solution-focused based therapy, which is very kind of short-term work, very, again, solution-focused. Right, you have this problem. How do we fix this or how do we find the solution in a very therapeutic way, in the shortest amount of time possible? Which I personally think, especially if you think about kind of male psychology or male kind of psychological services, I think that should be the main kind of therapeutic model within those settings, rather than sitting down and for weeks and weeks and months and months and months, to kind of to really, obviously there's some benefits in that. There are going to be some situations where that's beneficial, but I think for myself and kind of probably the vast majority of men, they want that kind of solution focus. I've got this issue. How do I you know, find a solution, and how do I find a solution for myself?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you're right in terms of men do need, well, any group, isn't it? Any person needs social context. And language is important. Like, do we understand one another? Like, it's not in terms of the syntax and the phonetics. It's more like, do we, like, just use the word football? That's a language. Well, it's a religion in this country, right? You see the mass followings and everyone got the different thousands every weekend and all that stuff, you know. And you know, if anyone listens to the podcast like you, Abdi, I'm a Liverpool supporter, so
there we go.
you know, we know how it works, isn't it, with fan behaviour. But I think the other thing is like, if you try and force people to put this shoe on and it doesn't fit, the person would walk away from the service or walk away from you, and you're causing more damage long term, isn't it? Because it's like, you know, I'm not going to bother with you lot anymore because you've caused me enough pain putting that shoe on.
But Joel, also, you got to think about it in a sense of, because we're talking about kind of like male and female kind of psychologists and kind of people that access services. Then you add on the extra layer of, there are people that, and I know a lot of my friends that, you know, they won't access services unless they know that there's going to be someone that's probably the same background of them, or has some understanding of the cultural aspects of kind of the things that they're going through. The way that I kind of imagine this in my head is that if I went to, I don't know, let's say if I had, you know, someone, let's say I have a service user come through to my service, and I don't know, they were, you know, originally from China. I don't know anything about kind of Chinese culture or anything like that. So for me, I know myself personally, I would ask, is there any kind of cultural needs or anything that I need to kind of have an understanding of? Especially if I'm seeing them, let's say if I'm seeing them face to face, in some cultures, it might not be appropriate for, a man and a woman to be in a room by themselves talking about kind of intimate feelings and things like that. So it's about kind of having that kind of understanding, but also having that ability to ask. But then thinking from the service user perspective, imagine, again, using the example of a Chinese lady, would she be comfortable kind of speaking to me about kind of the difficulties that she's going through? Would she think, oh, this guy, this Dr. Mohamed, he would know how I'm feeling, or the cultural aspects of kind of what I'm going through? She probably wouldn't. But then you then bring in someone that kind of has that understanding, even if it's not a case, because I'm not saying, if people are going for therapeutic sessions or going into psychology services, they need to be paired up with someone from the same kind of ethnic background or anything. But just having the people in the team, you're able to then say, I'm able to at least go and consult people and say, I've got this service user. I'm just trying to be very, very conscious of their kind of cultural needs. What is there anything I need to know about kind of urgently, or is there any kind of boundaries that I need to know about that might not be boundaries in other kind or in my own culture? Does that make sense? Even things like, if I'm seeing them face to face, do I shake the hand? Yes or no? Do I what do I do? like, do you know what I mean? Do I give eye contact? Do I not give eye contact? It's all these things that not everyone, every kind of clinical professional, every clinician needs to have that kind of that understanding of. I'll give you a quick story actually, which again, this is probably one of the first times that I realized people from ethnic minority backgrounds need to be in psychology services. And that was, again, this goes back to when I was a support worker. So when I was a support worker, I remember I went with one of the psychologists to this service user's house, and this service user was obviously Jamaican or Caribbean background, right? And I remember we went to the house, and I sat there, kind of just, we sat in the house, we're talking to the service user, but the service user had his family around. It was like an initial assessment and things like that. So we're all just talking, and they're all talking to each other. They're all kind of talking to us. I'm just there chilling. I'm having my cup of tea. Like I'm good. Then all of a sudden, the psychologists were like, "We need to leave immediately." And I was like, "Wait, what? Like, what you mean? Like, oh, is everything okay? Like, what's okay? Okay." Bear in mind, I'm a support worker. I think it was like 3 months into me being a support worker. So I was like, "Okay, let's go then." I think I left like half the cup of tea. I was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry. We're gonna have to go." Things like that. And we went in his car. And I remember I was in the car, and he was like, "I need to get back to the office." I was like, "Oh, well, have we got a meeting? Like, what's going on?" He's like, "No, I need to make a safeguard." A what, sorry? A safeguard consent. Like, you need to put in a safeguarding form for who? He goes, for the service users. Did you not feel that? And I'm like, what do you, and the way I worded it was, what do you think you felt? Like, what do you think happened when we were there? What did you see? Because I'm thinking maybe there's something, because I'm a support worker, aspiring. Yeah, it's something I missed. I'm like an aspiring psychologist at this time. I'm like, okay, what did I miss? And he was like, the way they spoke to each other. I was like, huh? And he was like, did you not see the way they were shouting at each other? They were taking the mick out of each other. That's not how family should be. And I was like, in my head, I was like, that's exactly how my family would talk to each other. Like, that's not how, like, I felt at home. I was I ain't gonna lie to you, I was catching jokes as well. I was laughing my head off when I was in the service user's house. And I remember I spent, because it was like a 20-minute like car journey, and I had to spend the next kind of like 15 minutes explaining to him that that I didn't, in a very respectful way, I don't think that was anything wrong with how they were talking. That's just kind of how culturally they're loud. Like, that's just their family. They're loud people. And he was like, but you don't see how they were moving? And I was like, I talk with my hands a lot. Like, I'd be like this, and hands in your face, everything. So I'm like, it's not, no. I was like, no. And towards the end, I felt really sad about this, because in the end, he was like, no, I have to make I'm the psychologist. I have the concerns. I'm going to make a safeguarding complaint. And I was like, so we actually went ahead and done it. And now I'm like, I remember thinking to myself, because we didn't see that family again, because they, surprise, they disengaged. So, and I'm thinking to myself, they must have been sat there going, we've just got this. Now we've got a social worker involved. We've got this person. We've got these people thinking that we're abusive. But for what? What do we do? And then having this clinician made a safeguarding complaint against you. That confusion and that anger of, well, why? What did we do? Of course, that's gonna not only are they gonna disengage, but then what's gonna happen? They're then gonna go and tell loads of other people, oh, I went to that service, I went to the mental health service, I went to this service, and they made a safeguarding complaint. Why? I don't know, because they came to the house, they were all smiles. One of them was and there was a black guy there, and why didn't he say anything? Do you see what I mean? So it's like I remember that to this day, because I remember thinking to myself, and I still think about this now. I'm like, I can imagine that family now still probably remember that same way that I remember it, but remember it for different reasons, and say, because at least I knew that, okay, I tried to kind of support the psychologist in understanding from a different perspective, but they are completely in the dark of, well, why was there safeguards? And that's going to be on their record forever now, all because of, let's be real, psychologists that didn't understand kind of the different cultures and how different cultures kind of interact with each other. Do you see what I mean?
Well, absolutely, and thanks for sharing. I think it's a great example of, like, and for listeners, say that's the real impact, because we've probably, if we're talking about how many lives there we've potentially just harmed for no reason, and this is the important, this is the importance of why we should turn up in this space, and we need to be here, because
imagine if that happened now, right? That happened, I'm the qualified psychologist, I'm the doctor, right? And someone said to me, oh my God, this happened, that happened. And I was in that exact same room. Do you think that I would have been, because don't forget, at the time, there's a power imbalance as well. I'm the support worker.
Yeah.
I'm in that moment, I'm the support worker. I am the unqualified clinician here, talking to the psychologist, the qualified psychologist. So there's that power imbalance that I kind of felt like I couldn't speak up a lot more, or even during the safeguarding to even reach out to the social worker to say, listen, I was there, it wasn't like that, it wasn't this, because I'm still in that team. I'm, in a sense, I've just started my career. I don't want to step on anyone's toes. But bro, if that happened now, like, do you think that it would have escalated that far? It would have been what? No. Like, what did you see? And I probably would have put it on the other psychologist and been like, wait, no, you just don't understand different cultures. So instead of you making the safeguarding, because I feel like you need to go on some training, you need to do something to kind of to broaden your horizon, because what you're thinking is kind of a safeguarding saying, or something that you find strange, is normal in other cultures. Do you see what I mean? But again, I had to keep at this, if that makes sense. You have to kind of get to a certain level in order to have that kind of influence. Whereas if not a lot of people from these backgrounds, if they're not kind of going into health psychology, psychology in general, all that's going to happen is there's going to be this cycle of exactly what happened then. That's just going to keep continuing. And it's going to be difficult, but it needs more people from ethnic minority backgrounds to be able to kind of get into psychology and to get into kind of psychological roles and more senior psychological roles in order to make these in order to be able to make these changes. But then that starts the whole other conversation of, well, what are the barriers of people? what are the financial barriers? Because I'm thinking to myself, let's be real, you're paid pennies in comparison to other professions. I got paid, it's only now, I'll be honest, I'll be so transparent, it's only now, being fully qualified, that I've kind of got to a point where I'm like, okay, cool, now financially it starts to make sense. Like, it starts to make sense financially. But I had to go through damn near 10 years of it not making sense and missing out on a lot of things, and seeing a lot of my friends from other backgrounds, from other kind of pursuing other careers, doing a lot better in terms of being able to do a lot more financially and kind of socially, whereas I almost had to stay in my lane, in a sense, in order to be able to afford to live, in a sense. So it's only now really that it starts to make sense. But I'm looking at, I don't envy kind of aspiring psychologists that are going through the rat race of trying to get onto a doctorate, on band 4 salaries, sometimes even band 3 support worker roles. And I don't envy their position. I'm empathetic towards it because I was there. But it is just knowing that you go through this short hardship in order to get through, in a sense, the bottleneck, get to a position where you can make change, and like I said, it starts to make sense financially. So it's almost like the best of both worlds, but you need to almost stick at it to get to that point.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's only, and that's why I think a lot of people sometimes don't make it, because the financial pressures are too much, especially in this climate, right? And what's coming ahead. That's what we need to think about. It's like, okay, well, if we keep producing the same type of psychologists like this model, and we don't address it and help those people from those backgrounds, we're going to keep getting those experiences that the one you just basically described.
Well, if you think about it, I put a poll out, or the question, on my Instagram story a couple of weeks back, basically saying, and it was quite a loaded question, I'm not gonna lie to you, but the question basically was saying, why is psychology mainly white middle class women? Why? Like, it's not, again, no kind of no hate, no anything, just a genuine curiosity of why. And a lot of the responses was that kind of, there was a lot of financial barriers to getting into psychology. Just think, there are genuinely things called honorary assistant psychologist posts, which is basically an assistant psychologist post that you do for free. Imagine working for free, doing a very difficult job, and it's not even like a 1 day, 2 day job. It's a full time, 5 days a week, and you ain't getting paid a penny. And you think, if in order, people will actually, and those positions will be rammed with applicants, because and who are these people? Who are these applicants? People that can afford to not work for 6 months. So you just take, I don't know, you take someone that is, just graduated with their psychology degree, probably like from let's say an ethnic minority background, that most likely, or probably has one, bills to pay. Like, everyone has bills to pay, let's be real. But then also the expectation, I know for myself, from from my background, as soon as you finish your degree, you're almost like, right, cool, you need to start earning now. Like, what's the point in you doing your degree if you're not going to make money from it? Like, so there's that expectation of, you just made your degree, you gotta earn, because you got to earn for the family, you got to earn to survive, in a sense. Are you really going to be looking at kind of an honorary assistant psychologist post, or honorary anything, or voluntary anything? Like, you're not gonna. So again, that was a lot of the responses, was the kind of the financial barrier. But then also, you got to think, if you're then going into an interview panel of, let's be real, mostly white middle class women, are you gonna, and you don't fit that criteria, are they gonna choose you, or are they gonna choose someone that is not looks like them, but has the same understanding as them? Does that make sense? So
absolutely.
So it's like, it's thinking, there are so many barriers. That's why now, especially in any role that I've been in, and even any roles now, I will make it a point to be on kind of interview panels, to be like, okay, cool, let me be on the panel. You got an interview, I'll be on the panel, because it's like, it's bringing a different perspective to the roles, if that makes sense, especially psychological roles, where it kind of, at one point, I remember years ago, at one point, it literally felt like copy and paste, copy paste with every psychologist that I met. So again, that is another barrier. And again, I wish I had kind of a instant solution, but the instant solution is that more psychologists from ethnic minority backgrounds, and they are trying to kind of make this kind of, trying to have a real push to have more psychologists from ethnic minority backgrounds to go through doctorates and things like that. But it takes the already training psychologists, and the qualified psychologists that are from ethnic minority backgrounds, to be actively involved in the recruitment and in the nurturing of the next generation, in a sense. Because let's be real, I'm probably the furthest thing away from a typical psychologist. That's one of the reasons why Psychosis did so well, because it was like, who is this guy? And a lot of times, at the very beginning, genuinely, people were looking, going, this guy cannot be a psychologist. He has to be pulling our legs. But by that, kind of drew people in. But again, it was something different. And I want more people, especially from ethnic minority backgrounds, to kind of go into psychology, to excel in psychology, to then use different platforms, use different mediums. So things like using, psychologists are terrible with using technology. Like we are literally in the stone age. As a profession, we are in the stone age in terms of when it comes to using, things like social media, things like, using the tools, the technology that's available to us now. But I want more, especially aspiring psychologists from ethnic minority backgrounds, to put up their stories, to kind of document their journeys. Jolel, you've seen my journey. Everyone has seen my journey from, when I was an assistant psychologist, to when I got onto training, to when I do my doctorate, when I failed my first assignment, when I graduated. So everyone's seen the kind of the progression. And I get so many messages from aspiring psychologists from ethnic minority backgrounds that have watched my journey, have kind of gone back to my videos and kind of looked through everything. They can do that. But I want more people to be able to do that. I want more people to document their journeys, because the more people, especially from ethnic minority backgrounds, that do that, the more that other people see that and go, oh, let me give this psychology thing a try. Okay, I know that it's not all white middle class, because so-and-so's, I follow so-and-so on Instagram, I follow so-and-so on Twitter, like I follow so-and-so on TikTok. That's another thing. Oh my God, like we need, but when psychologists, especially aspiring psychologists, when they get into TikTok, oh my gosh, remember I said it now, okay? Because give it 3 years, every psychology graduate will be doing TikToks about mental health, which is great, because that is literally direct to consumer. But doing that, like posting and documenting the journey, and being consistent in documenting the journey, because again, I get a lot of, I've lost track of how many, it's like on the daily, how many kind of new psychology pages are opened up. Again, copy and paste, but I want to see it from different people, from different experiences, different walks of life, different ethnicities. I want to see kind of a lot more, in a sense, to be able to push the profession forward.
Yeah. It's been a fascinating conversation, Abdi.
We ran over.
Yeah, I just got lost in my train of thought. I was thinking about what you've said, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity here. Did you want to explain to the audience what you do, if they want to get in contact with you, if they want to work with you, collaborate, or share some insight? Because you never know. People, we've had other people contacting other guest speakers. So if you want to explain what you do and leave your contact details, that would be great.
Yeah. So I'm Dr. Abdi Mohamed, the Dr. Abdi on Instagram, Dr. Abdi Mohamed on Twitter, and previously psychicist, but I've kind of come away from that since I qualified, because again, there's not, the website's still there, but there's not a lot of more information I can give in terms of the pre-qualified phase, because I'm not there anymore. But yeah, at the minute, obviously I'm a health psychologist, working currently within an NHS CAM service, which is very, very interesting, especially kind of being a health psychologist, not a clinical psychologist. And just, I thought that I'd be out of place, but I think as time gone on, I've kind of realized that they need us more than they know. So that's been good. I also obviously run my own kind of mental health company, that's a whole nother experience in itself. Actually, running a private service and developing a private service, and seeing going from clinician to clinician, kind of manager, marketer, everything. So that's been an interesting kind of transition as well, especially since being qualified. But yeah, if anyone wants to get in contact, just literally just DM me on Instagram, just at the Dr. Abdi. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. And yeah, I don't really have an email, but hey, it's one of them. Or you can check me out on the service called CareGen. So it's basically a private kind of autism assessment service. That again, that's been like I said, it's been very eye-opening, especially the marketing side of things, and having kind of a team of people that are kind of doing the marketing. This is what I said about TikTok, because we literally went from, I think I was on like 400-500, because I used the old Psychicist TikTok, which was on about 500-600 followers. I literally neglected that so much over the years. And then when they kind of took over in terms of the marketing side of things and switched into CareGen, we literally went within like 3 months. We went from like 600 to 20K, like that. It was, I've never seen this. Is what I said, like, in terms of, I want future psychology graduates and future psychologists to be able to use platforms like TikTok to get the kind of psychological message out there, because the growth is crazy and the reach is crazy as well. And there's a lot we can use that platform and use, not just TikTok, but Instagram and kind of Twitter and things like that. Instead of arguing amongst ourselves about different models and things like that, let's just put things out to the general public that are going to benefit them. Things like anxiety management strategies, and, you know, how to combat depression, or what the top 3 services are. I'm giving away loads of content ideas, but please do it. The 3 best services in the UK for adults with depression. You know what I mean? Just things like that. You would be surprised how much people want to see that, and then how much, in a sense, TikTok then pushes that out to people. I think I've got like 4 or 5 videos that have got over 100,000 views, and you think you would never get that on anything else. And it's something, again, a tool that psychologists should be using in order to disseminate their kind of work, disseminate their research. It's doing that kind of in a different way. So yeah, if anyone wants to get in contact, that kind of needs support in terms of autism or anything like that, you can CareGen, which is, it's on, if you type it onto Google, CAREGEN, CareGen, which the funny thing about that is I called it CareGen because it's next generation care.
No, right.
I mean, that's the tagline, like next generation care. But anyway, so if anyone wants to get in contact about that, you just type in onto Google CareGen. We are the second kind of link that comes up. I'm really annoyed that we're not first, but we'll get there. I've given the team kind of a target to get number 1 in the world in Google. But yeah, that's kind of where you can find me.
No, and thanks so much, Abdi, again for your time. I'll put the details in the description for people to contact. You know, we might have a further conversation down the line. Look forward to seeing how you develop and grow, and seeing how others will make use of the conversation. But thanks again for your time. You listen to the Health Psychology Podcast, Equality, Diversity, Inclusion. Until next time, goodbye.